This special Brightline construction update provides an overview of the entire installation of the Cocoa Tunnel, which occurred in March and April 2021. The Cocoa Tunnel is located at the interchange between State Road 528 and US 1 in Cocoa, Florida, and is where Brightline's new line to Orlando will diverge from the existing Florida East Coast Railway main line to head west. We'll start on day 0, March 14th, which was filmed hours before crews showed up to begin road closures and start the installation. The embankment next to State Road 528 had been excavated back as far as safely possible. The 3 tunnel segments were complete. The first segment is on the right and the third is on the left. This tunnel is being installed using a method called box jacking, which uses hydraulic jacks to push the tunnel segments into place. Between the first segment and the large pile of dirt in that shadowy area are the 21 jacks that will do the pushing. They are mounted on the edge of the first segment. By the evening of day 1, massive progress had been made. The eastbound lanes of State Road 528 had been closed overnight with 1 lane of traffic in either direction using the normal westbound lanes. Crews had made quick work of excavating the eastbound lanes to make way for the first segment. The first segment also began its journey forward. Once the jacks extend as far as they can go and then retract, light blue beams are laid in the resulting gap to be pushed against. Once enough of those beams are used, they are removed and long rods are put into their place. This is repeated for the entire push. On day 2, the first segment had been pushed far enough forward that it was past the leading edge of the second segment. Crews were in the process of removing all of the rods and beams to prepare for the second segment to make a lateral movement in behind the first segment. Over the course of the third day, the second segment had made its lateral movement in behind the first segment. Crews were already beginning to remove the rods and beams that were used for that push. All 3 of these tunnel segments are built wide enough so that 2 tracks can be laid through the finished tunnel and trains will be able to pass inside. The joint between the 2 segments would be waterproofed as they are joined together. The excavation in front of the first segment had progressed to the edge of the first 2 lanes of traffic that were still in use. Day 4 saw the start of the move of the then combined first 2 segments forward. In the space where the second segment was originally constructed, a yellow crane had moved in to start assembling the dark blue frame that will be part of the anti-drag system on top of the second segment. When finished, this system will allow new lanes of traffic to be built on top of the tunnel segments while allowing the tunnel to continue to move forward underneath. The segments continued to move forward as that assembly was happening on top of the second segment. On day 5, the combined first 2 segments continued to move forward, and work on the dark blue frame for the anti-drag system continued on top of the segments. Next to the active lanes of traffic, pilings and metal plates were being installed to hold up the embankment under the road so the excavation work could continue right up to that edge. Forward movement of the segments stopped on day 6 so the installation of the anti-drag system could begin. On either side of the tunnel segments at the top of the embankment, concrete foundations had been built to attach the dark blue frame to. Crews were in the process of attaching the frame to it as I filmed. The dark blue frame is also linked to large concrete anchors on the ground located on either side of the tunnel by the way of metal cables. This view also provides a look at the curve the tracks will eventually follow as they start heading west to Orlando. Work on the anti-drag system continued on day 7. Crews began laying metal plates on the roof of the first tunnel segment. These plates are bolted together to form a solid combined surface that is smooth on the tunnel roof. The plates are then linked to the dark blue frame, which will make sure the plates are not pulled forward while the tunnel moves underneath. The crew in the white protective suits are painting a red lubricant that is similar in consistency to Crisco onto the roof of the tunnel. This is to help prevent unnecessary friction while the segments move. On day 8, crews were in the process of rebuilding one lane of traffic over the tunnel segment. A sub-roadbed material was in the process of being spread onto the metal plates and graded flat. Crews were also continuing to lay more metal plates on the edge of the roof. Overnight, this lane would be paved and open to traffic. Looking from the north provides a look at the leading edge of the tunnel and the work on top. By the evening on day 9, the eastbound lane had been paved and the traffic had been rerouted to go over the tunnel. Crews were beginning to remove the pilings and metal plates that were holding up the lane that the eastbound traffic had previously been rerouted on so the tunnel could continue moving forward. The tunnel had also resumed its journey forward. When operating at the maximum speed possible, the tunnel can move forward 3 feet an hour, although the average speed on this job was roughly half that. The mini excavator inside the tunnel places the light blue beams in front of the jacks as the tunnel moves forward. On day 10, the third tunnel segment had moved laterally to be alongside the other 2 combined segments. Those combined segments had moved far enough forward that crews were beginning the process of laying sub-roadbed for the second lane of traffic to go over the tunnel. The tunnel was continuing to move underneath as this happened. Once that second lane is able to open for the westbound traffic to be rerouted onto, the old westbound lanes will be excavated so the tunnel can continue forward. Day 11 saw the second lane paved and traffic going over the tunnel heading both east and west. The demolition of the old westbound lanes had also begun, with 2 excavators working on that. The roof of the third segment received a black waterproof coating. Not much had changed on day 12. The tunnel segments had only moved forward slightly, no more than 5 to 10 feet. The excavation of the embankment that was under the old westbound lanes of traffic that is now in front of the tunnel is progressing slowly, but there is a reason for that. Once the segments are pushed off the foundation they were built on, they are moving solely on dirt. In order to control the movement of the tunnel segments as they push forward, crews change how the earth in front of them is excavated. The first tunnel segment was built with an overhanging angle. Using this angle, the segment can rise if additional dirt is left in its path, or lower if dirt is removed in front of it. Crews take measurements at least hourly, if not more frequently, while the segments are being pushed, to ensure the tunnel will be straight and level when it is in its final position. Day 13 looked roughly the same as when I left the day before. There was no visible change in the movement of the tunnel. There were also almost no workers on site, so progress was at a standstill. From this side, you can see that overhanging angle on the first segment. Day 14 saw minimal change as well, but there were signs that the worksite was coming back to life. Equipment was starting to move again, such as this excavator. Workers were moving around the jacks like they were going to start pushing again soon. And finally, workers had been arriving steadily throughout my flight and were circled up having a pre-shift meeting as I was finishing up. Day 15 saw some massive changes. The combined two segments moved forward far enough to clear the edge of the third segment. With them out of the way, crews were in the process of moving the third segment laterally to get in line with the other two segments. This mini excavator was moving beams that would be placed next to the jacks after the pistons retracted. The jacks are mounted on the side of the third segment. The segment was within feet of finishing the lateral movement by this point. Crews are able to make lateral movements like this quicker than the push under the road since it is being done on a flat and level foundation. By day 16, the lateral movement was complete and all three segments were combined. Crews were actively in the process of pushing the full tunnel forward. The gray bars going across the light blue rods are there to help prevent the rods from buckling under pressure while the jacks are pushing. Crews were disassembling the rods and beams that had been used for the lateral movement. On day 17, crews had to deal with some rain, which might have slowed their progress some. The tunnel continued to move forward, with the progress being roughly the length of one row of the light blue rods. More beams were getting ready to be inserted as the jacks were retracting. The yellow crane was also staging additional beams so they would be ready to go as the tunnel progressed forward. Day 18 was filmed around 13 hours later, and crews were back to moving at full speed. The first segment had moved far enough forward that it was basically past where the westbound lanes of traffic would normally be. Overnight, crews had moved far enough that another row of rods were able to be inserted. The tunnel only had another 10 to 20 feet left to go to reach its final position. I wasn't able to film for several days, but by the time I got back to filming on day 24, April 7th, the tunnel was fully installed. All 4 lanes of traffic on State Road 528 had been repaved and opened on top of the tunnel. All of the jacking equipment had been disassembled and was in the process of being stacked nearby, waiting to be taken away. I came back one final time on day 28, April 11th. Since there were no workers on site, I was comfortable flying closer than I did during the active installation to take a closer look at the finished product. There is now a clear view through the tunnel under State Road 528. Some equipment is still being stored inside for the time being. It's amazing to think that within a month, a tunnel was fully installed under a highway. If crews had used traditional methods to build an underpass, it would have taken over a year with a major disruption to traffic. Here's a closer look at the equipment used in the jacking. The blue boxes on the right control the jacks. The dark blue frame was part of the anti-drag system. The metal plates that were part of that system will remain under the roadway on the roof of the tunnel. Here are the thin bars that went across the rods to keep them from buckling. This frame held the jacks while they were pushing. And finally, here are the beams and rods. They have markings for Petrucco, which is the Italian company brought in to manage the push. All of the other associated work, including building the tunnel segments beforehand, was completed by general contractor Granite Construction, which is also responsible for building most of the new rail line to Orlando. There is a plastic tarp on the edge of the road to help keep the rain from washing away the dirt under the road. Here is one of the concrete anchors that held the anti-drag system in place. And finally, here is the massive dirt pile and concrete wall that provided a mass for the jacks to push against as the segments moved forward. To wrap up, here's a rough time lapse of the progress composed of pictures I took from roughly the same angle every day throughout the installation. I'll be back in this area again once crews begin the process of laying track through the tunnel and around the curve. Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Also check out my social media pages.